Greetings. Today is 1/24/2020, and I give you my most sincere apologies. I'm once again behind schedule on these videos. I was supposed to have my 7,000 year timeline narrative video out, but I didn't get to it. So I decided to make this video to let you guys know that I'm still here. And the reason I'm making this video is because I was having a discussion with someone, and they just couldn't seem to wrap their brains around the fact that New Jerusalem is a physical place. And when I realized that they couldn't understand that, I concluded that it was the fact of how they viewed what spiritual means that was keeping them from truth. So I thought the best way to address it is to explain what spirit is. And that's why I'm going to do this video. Hopefully keep it nice and short. But something has come up recently that I wanted to make you guys aware, and I encourage you to keep your eye on it, because the timing is very interesting. But you probably heard of it by now. It's this new outbreak of the coronavirus that they believe began in Wuhan, China. Alright. Now, as you all know, they like to play things up with their propaganda. You know, there was the swine flu, the bird flu, MERS, SARS, you know, and the list goes on and on and on. And every time something comes out, they act like, you know what I mean? It's it, this is it, we're done. The plague all over again. And a lot of the reason why they're like that is because we're due. We're actually past due. You know, there's a pattern, a cyclical pattern with pandemics, and they're basically believe that we're past due. So that's one of the reasons why I think they hype it up. But I found when this came out, when I was listening to the news concerning it and researching it a little bit, I found it to be fishy from the beginning. The reason being is because they raised the level of alertness on it immediately to the same level as Ebola. Now, they never did that with any of them other past viruses, or whatever you want to call it, flus. But they did it with this one. And it was just beginning to come out, so they say. And you all probably know how devastating Ebola is. So when I heard that, you know, the spidey senses turned on, and I said, said to myself, that's a little fishy. This thing just comes out. There's not even, there was, at the time when I heard this, it was like only 200 confirmed cases. But of course you can't believe the numbers. And all of a sudden they're elevating it to the threat level of what they view Ebola. That didn't make sense to me. But the reason why my antennas were up is because of the timing. Let me show you what I mean by that. Okay. All right. As we went over in past videos, Matthew 24, I believe it's Mark 13, and Luke 21 is the Messiah. He's answering the apostles' question concerning the end of the age and the sign of his coming. And then he goes on to give the sign of his coming, and he answers them and tells them what the sign of his coming is. And then when we get the revelation from John, and you put two and two together, you realize that the beginning of the sign of his coming, or the coming process, is the seals. First couple seals. And he refers to it as the birth pains. Okay? And like we went over in past videos, we are currently in the birth. And at the Revelation 12:1 sign in September 23rd, 2017, that was the conception of the birth. And the birth process is going to be 9 years. So right now we're 2 years into the birthing process of the 9 years. However, the Messiah refers to the birth pains as the seals when they start to open. Okay. And one of the signs of the seals is plagues, right here, things to come. And this is Luke 21. He says plagues. Over here in King James is translated as pestilences. Okay? And then we see in Revelation 6, this is pestilence. Over here in King James is translated as death. Okay? But when we go to the Greek, I believe it's Luke 21:11. Okay. The word pestilence, the definition is a plague, as you can see here. A plague, singular. And it also can mean a pesty person. But the Messiah here is speaking about a plague. All right. And then when we go to Revelation 6, and it's in verse 8. We have the translation as plague in the interlinear, but the Greek it's thanato, which is a variation of thanatos. Thanatos being the proper name of death with the capital. Long story short, the Messiah is telling us during the birth pains, there's a plague Okay? Now, like I said, my antennas went up because of the timing. This coronavirus comes out of nowhere. And then Bill Gates did a simulation about a coronavirus, and that it would end up killing 65 million people. And he even predicted that it would come from a biological warfare attack. And a lot of people think that, a biological attack would have to happen in the United States or have something to do with the United States. But that's not all, that doesn't have to be the case, because there's other entities around the world that don't like each other. For instance, Japan and China have been enemies for centuries. And then there's groups within Japan that are apocalyptic and that want to bring about the end time. So my point in saying that is that it doesn't have to be America. And another interesting fact about this thing is that the city where it came out of in China, there's a lab there that deals with very extremely dangerous pathogens. So it's very suspicious, and like I said, the timing is what put my antennas up, because I know we are, via the math in Scripture, that we should be right on the precipice of the open door in heaven, and then the crowning, and then the seals. Okay? Now, like we went over in past videos, the Messiah does not get his dominion, his kingdom, his crown until Revelation 5. Alright? We're still waiting for that event. It's not official yet. It's not official until he is presented to the Almighty as worthy to open the seals. We see that in Daniel. Okay? Daniel 7, 9, and 10. This is Revelation 4. The thrones are set up, which is the congregation of Philadelphia, the wise virgins, the elders. The Ancient of Days, the Almighty, takes his seat at the main throne. And then the courts sit, which are the elders, the wise virgins, the congregation of Philadelphia. And then the books are opened. And then the Messiah is presented to the Almighty as worthy. And then the Almighty gives him dominion, glory, and a kingdom. The only way he could have this kingdom is after the first rapture, because flesh cannot inherit the kingdom, so a portion of his people have to be there in their redeemed bodies. And that's what's occurring. The first rapture occurs, which is the thrones being set up. Then the elders sit at the court to be like witnesses. And then the Messiah is presented as worthy, and that's when he gets his kingdom. Because the Almighty created everything. He created this universe as an inheritance to give to his only begotten Son. And this is the beginning of that transfer of ownership. The chosen one The only begotten Son is found worthy, and the Father passes on the inheritance to the champion. Alright? So my point in saying all that is that this is where he gets the crown. Alright, and then the seals begin. And part of the seals, which are the birth pains, is pestilence, plague. Right? So what's my point? Is that this virus, who Bill Gates predicts can kill up to 65 million people worldwide, is called the coronavirus. Corona is Latin for crown. We were at the precipice of the crowning event. One of the birth pains is a plague, and all of a sudden a virus that everybody's all up in arms about comes out, and its name is the crown virus. I find that extremely interesting, and I encourage you all to keep your eye on it. Right? So, back to the subject at hand. Spirit. What is spirit? Alright? And this is where we are as far as time. Okay? Today is the 24th day of the first month of 2020. In our modern calendar, however, it's the 8th day of the 11th month on the Almighty's calendar. Okay? And it's the 8th day of the 11th month of the 7th year of the 7th Sabbath week of the 119th Jubilee. What does that mean? It means it's the 5,999th year from when the Jubilee count began, when Adam was transformed from caveman into made in the image of the Almighty in 3980 BC. It is also the 8th day of the 11th month of the 7th year of the 6th Sabbath week of the 119th Jubilee, which is the 5,993rd year from the birth of sin, which occurred in 3,973 BC. It's also the 8th day of the 11th month of the 64th year of the 70th generation, meaning the fallen ones are imprisoned for 70 generations and they're released in 2026. We are in the 4,893rd year of their imprisonment from 2874 BC. We are also in the 8th day of the 11th month of the 1986th year from the ascension of the Messiah. He ascended in 33 AD, and he will descend to tread the winepress in 2033 AD, 2033. It is also the 8th day of the 11th month of the first year in the 70th week, which is the 483rd year from the Daniel 9 count of the 70th week, seven generations from Suleiman's decree in 1536 AD. And we are also in the 8th day of the 11th month of the 71st year of the final generation, which began in 1948. And will end on the 80th, which is when the mark is set up and human flesh will cease to exist. Those who refuse the mark will be killed and raptured up to New Jerusalem. Those who take the mark will no longer be human. They will be hybrids. So that's just a little tidbit about time. Okay. So, this is what I believe separates us from the rest of creation. And because I believe prior to Eden, humanity was here for hundreds of thousands of years, maybe millions of years, I don't know how long, but they were here for a long time. But they were simply cavemen, not much different from animals. Yes, they had dominion because they were, smarter than regular animals, but they weren't much different. It was the circle of life. However, in Eden, when the Almighty took Adam from his land where he was, when he made Adam into his image, I believe that's when Adam got an everlasting spirit made in the image of the Almighty. Prior to that, I don't believe humans had spirits, so to speak. Like we weren't much different than a tree. It's just part of the circle of life. But after Eden, that's when we were transformed. Okay? And this is the scripture that says we're made in the image of the Almighty. So, what am I trying to say here is that I believe spirit is the ancient way of saying energy. Meaning, if scripture was written today in today's language, they wouldn't say spirit, they would say energy. Okay? And interestingly, Paul in Colossians 1:17 tells us a scientific fact 2,000 years in advance to us knowing what is actually occurring. He says that the Messiah, YaHushuWaH, holds all things together. Alright? Because technically, we're made up of particles. And if you stack a whole bunch of little, particles of sand into a shape of a human, what's going to happen? They're all going to fall to the ground. Same thing with everything in the whole universe. If it's all made of particles, why isn't it just collapsing? It's because there's something there that holds it all together. And Paul tells us who it is. It's the Messiah. Alright? So, when you understand that spirit is energy, it clarifies things. So it was the energy of the Almighty that was hovering over the waters in the beginning. Alright? In John 4:24, when it says that the Almighty is spirit, what he's saying is the Almighty is energy. That's why when we see his throne, there's flashes of lightning, electric energy, peals of thunder, sound energy, tongues of fire, thermal energy, etc., etc. Okay? Romans 7:14, it says that the law is energy. The law is the energy of life, Romans 8:2. Okay? You are the temple of the Almighty, and the energy of the Almighty dwells in you. So, the Messiah holds all things together. Well, what does that mean? Okay, now when we look at the definition of energy, the law of the conservation of energy. Okay, one thing when it comes to science is that there's theories and there's laws. A law is typically something that has been in effect for a long time and it has not been proven wrong. So humans have concluded that it is a law. All right? It's not just a theory anymore. That it is the truth of how things operate. And it says that the law of the conservation of energy states that energy can be converted but not created or destroyed. So what's that saying? It's saying that energy was always here. The one who was, the one who is, the one who always will be. Okay? Now, like we said, if you stack a bunch of particles of sand together, what's going to happen? It's going to just collapse. So why don't we collapse since we're made up of a bunch of particles? It's because there's something holding us all together. And Paul tells us that that something is the Messiah. Okay, and in science, it's referred to as the strong force. And the strong force is 137 times as strong as electromagnetism, 1,000,000 times as strong as weak interaction, and 10 to the 38th power times as strong as gravitation. Are you serious? 10 to the 38th power? Stronger than gravitation? Okay. Why am I saying all this? Is that basically this is the essence of the Almighty. He is the one. He's the unseen force that holds all things together. Flashes of lightning, peals of thunder, tongues of fire. That's why he refers to as his holy ones, the holy angels, as beings of light, energy. And Enoch tells us that when he seen them, they were fire beings. They looked like fire. But when they wished, they came into human form. Meaning they can manipulate energy. Alright? So, and this works both ways. Ever since sin was brought forth, now there's an evil energy. So there's a holy energy which comes from the Almighty. And he manifests himself into a being that has a throne. But ultimately, he is the energy that has made this universe with all information is in him, in his energy. And when you or on his family, you get his holy energy. When you do his will, you get more of his energy. When you're faithful to his son, you get more of his energy. When you pray and ask for more of his energy, he gives it to you in abundance. But then the same thing goes for the other side, the dark side, the evil. When they do things that are evil, they get evil energy. And there is some power in that, but what good is it when there is going to come a time when that's going to end? John 1, 1 John 3:24, the one who keeps his commandments abides in him, in his holy energy, and his holy energy abides in him. We know that he abides in us by his holy energy that dwells, empowers us. Okay? So basically we are like living batteries. And the more we keep his commandments, obey the Messiah, grow in sanctification, the more holy energy our bodies are filled with, energized with. And then on the other side of that is the more we sin, the more calloused we get, the more we grieve the holy energy, the more we're depleted. And then same thing goes with the sons of disobedience. They receive their evil energy by obeying the flesh, being carnal, and being evil. Okay? Now, interestingly, I listened to a interview a while back on the radio about this modern day philosopher who wrote a book called The Theory of Everything. And, he made a lot of sense. But anyway, his conclusion was that the universe was created by a thought. Now, he tried to play it off that it was, like consciousness thinking. A universal consciousness thinking. But what I realized when he was saying this is that we were told this 2,000 years ago in Revelation. In Revelation 4:11, it says, "You created all things because your will they existed." So what is the will of the Almighty? It's a thought. So this guy was right that the universe was created by a thought. But he was wrong in not giving the credit to the Almighty where it's due. So now that you understand that spirit just means energy, it should be easier to understand that New Jerusalem is a physical place. So when he says that it's made mostly of diamond, precious stones, these are all physical things. And it's physically coming at the end of the sixth seal. The sign of the Son of Man is the wormhole that opens, and then New Jerusalem comes through. And it's a physical place. It's not this fantasy spiritual land. It is a physical place. And I understand that the translations and we're getting our information from ancient peoples, it's difficult because heaven can refer to 4 different things in Scripture. When it's talking about where the Almighty lives, it's talking about New Jerusalem. When it's talking about space, the cosmos, it means space, and then sometimes it means the atmosphere, the sky, where the clouds are. So yeah, I understand that it is a little difficult to navigate through, but the bottom line is that New Jerusalem is a physical place, and that when most of the time when the scripture is talking about spirit, it's our modern day meaning energy. And Enoch, Jeremiah, Zechariah all speak about how the Almighty will go forth from his holy habitation in the last generation. Many of the prophets speak of the coming. And I'm here to tell you, the Almighty is literally coming. In Revelation 6, after the wormhole opens up, which is the sign of the Son of Man in Revelation 6:14, what's the next thing we see? We see humanity saying, hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne. Well, who's sitting on the throne? The Ancient of Days, the Almighty. And who's right next to him? The Messiah. Well, they're seeing him. This is all of humanity sees him. Well, how are they seeing him if he's off in some fantasy place, some fantasy spiritual realm? How are they seeing him? Because it's not a fantasy realm. It is here, physically here. And he's here at this point in time. And it's when mercy ends and the wrath begins. The transition after the day of redemption. The Messiah gathers up his people into New Jerusalem so that he can execute the wrath. Okay? So, the Creator of all is coming to reestablish his holy order and clean the effects of sin. To clean up the mess that the fallen ones brought about and that the dumb humans fell for. Alright? And it's not fantasy. It's going to be physical, and every eye will see it. And every knee will bow down to the Messiah at Revelation 5, when he gets his crown and his kingdom. That's when every knee bows, and every single thing ever created is going to acknowledge that event, and life will never be the same. And if you're with him, it's good news. And if you're not, it's very, very bad news. Alright? So, I'm going to do one more video before the 7,000 year narrative about the hidden war, because that'll help with the narrative. And I encourage you all to really seek the Messiah and the Almighty, because time is short. We're under 2 months. So, until the next time, may the will of the Almighty be done in the name of his only begotten Son, YaHushuWaH.